I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1842 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. In this episode, we're going to talk about vehicles. You know, just like Hank Williams Jr. and Billy Gibbons of the ZZ Top, most all Vietnam veterans were and still are interested in cars and vehicles. I received a tremendous response to episode 1839er, where I talked about the demise of the Vietnam-era M-113 armored personnel carriers. Those vehicles were near and dear to many Vietnam veterans. You can tell it was a good one because it's still in service in the Army. But it's soon going to be shipped out to the old folks' farm or museums or barns across the nation, where veterans like to get one of those and put it out and save it. It's being replaced by something called the AMPV. That's short for the Armored Multi-Purpose Vehicle. We talked about how they were finally coming in, and these were a little bigger, a little better, a little faster, held more stuff. Those are going to come in and put the M113s out into the pasture. Recently, there was a story about this on the Slash and Gear website. That story announced that the Army had received their first AMPV in person, real, with more on the way. There was another very interesting story on the Slash and Gear website where they talked about a new vehicle the Army has just purchased, known as the Infantry Squad Vehicle. This is a new vehicle the Army has just purchased that is designed to carry 9 troops. They say all it is an upgraded Chevrolet pickup. It looks interesting. I'm going to share a story about that too. First, let me share a little bit of the story about the number 1 AMPV delivered to the U.S. Army. That story was titled, U.S. Army Gets Its First AMPV Vehicle to Replace Vietnam War-Era M113s. This story was provided by Brittany Roston. Let's take a look at what she has to say about this new arrival to the motor pool. I'm assuming they still have motor pools. There's been a lot of changes in the military since most Vietnam veterans were there. Dateline, Smash and Gear website. B&A Systems has announced the completion of the first armored multi-purpose vehicle, better known as AMPV, built for the United States Army. Ones that will, over time, replace the Army's M113s from the Vietnam War era. According to BAE Systems, the first of its AMPV production models has left the line and was, as of September the 1st, scheduled to be delivered to the military. The company has developed 5 different variants of this vehicle. BAE Systems announced the milestone on September the 1st, detailing multiple variants of the AMPV that will be delivered to the U.S. Army. The first one off the line is the Mission Command Vehicle, which is designed with growth capability for command control, communications, and computer capabilities. The Mission Command is joined by 4 other variants: the General Purpose Vehicle, Mortar Carrier, Medical Evaluation, and Medical Treatment. Each has a fairly self-explanatory name, with the variants being designed for things like heavy mortar fire support, resupply runs, evacuation, and medical treatment, plus more. A spokesman for BAE by the name of Bill Sheehy said this about the vehicles. The AMPVs are made for the U.S. Army's Armored Brigade Combat Teams, which will benefit from significant improvements in interoperability, mobility, survivability, and power with the new models. These vehicles are designed in such a way that the Army will be able to update them as necessary when new technologies become available. All I can say is, I hope they serve the military as well as the good old M-113s. Next up, let's talk about this exciting new vehicle the Army has purchased from GM. It looks like an upgraded model of a Chevrolet Silverado pickup. I encourage you to go over to the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com. Check out episode 1842, and there you will see a picture of this new Infantry Squad vehicle. It can adequately carry 9 fully armed and equipped troops into the battlefield to keep up with those AMPVs. There was a story about this on the Slash and Gear titled, "The U.S. Army Needed a New Troop Transport. This is what GM built." This story was written and submitted by Mr. Chris Davies. Let's take a look at what Chris says about this new vehicle coming to the Army and more than likely the Marines to haul around squads on the battlefield. Dateline, Slash and Gear. GM may be bringing back the Hummer as an all-electric SUV, but the automaker is looking to tried and true tech for the new Infantry Squad vehicle it's building for the U.S. Army. This is a done deal. The company has signed a $214 million contract with the Army to produce and service more than 2,000 ultra-flexible troop transports. Though while they may look like Mad Max props, they're actually surprisingly familiar. Doing a little math here, as I often do when I look at government deals, that works out to a price of $107,150 per vehicle. That's a pretty good price tag for a upgraded Chevrolet pickup. Continuing. The brief was to develop an expeditionary ISV, light and agile enough to carry 9 personnel at once, at speed, through a battlefield. The vehicle needed to be tough and flexible, lightweight enough to sling underneath a UH-60 Blackhawk helicopter, yet also sufficiently compact to squeeze into a CH-47 Chinook. He says here this vehicle needs to be light and agile enough to carry 9 personnel at once at speed. That reminds me of those days back in Vietnam when we needed speed to drive through those ambushes on Highway 19 headed from Quien Yan up to Pleiku through the An Khe and the Man Yang passes. That was the best way to defeat those ambushes, in my opinion. And whenever we would run into them, I would say, "Let's Richard Petty right through here." So hopefully these upgraded pickup trucks can go fast enough to drive through bad situations like road ambushes. Continuing with the story. The Army also needed something that could withstand a low-velocity airdrop by fixed-wing C-130s and C-17 transport aircraft. That's no small order. Rather than cook up something entirely unique, however, General Motors Defense, that's the automaker's defense and security-focused subdivision, looked to more mainstream parts. That really does make pretty good sense. The ISV may not look like it, but it actually shares most of its parts with the 2020 Chevrolet Colorado ZR2 truck. Indeed, 90% of what makes up the Army's new ride is actually commercial off-the-shelf components. That includes the underlying architecture and a 2.8-liter Duramax turbo diesel engine paired with a 6-speed automatic transmission. It'll be good for 136 horsepower and be rated for up to 3,200 pounds of payload. The advantage, of course, is keeping the supply chain smooth for repairs and replacement parts. The GM Defense ISV suspension, for example, is based on the same system that Chevrolet Performance offers for the ZR2. Its Multimatic dual spool valve dampers are carried over too. There will be a standard occupant and cargo superstructure on all 2,065 of the ISVs that GM Defense produces for the Army. Beyond that, it'll be open to customization. The automaker is working with Ricard Defense, which will be responsible for the logistics of maintaining vehicles in the field. Transportability certification to make sure the ISV really can handle helicopter and aircraft deployment is up next, followed by initial operational testing and evaluation next summer and fall. That last statement leaves me with a question. The Army has already signed a contract to purchase 2,065 of these vehicles. Yet they have not been tested for their durability in helicopter and airdrop operations. What happens if they don't pass the test? Are they going to put all those vehicles on the used car lot? I wouldn't mind getting one of those vehicles to drive around the hills of South Central Florida. They have lots of sandy hills that you can easily get stuck in, and lots of swamps you can also get stuck in. One of these vehicles might come in real handy if they don't pass the test for the Army. Matter of fact, my good buddy Rick Scruggs, who lives on a farm out in Linneus, Missouri, could easily put one of these vehicles to use out there. There were two people who made comments to this story, which I'd like to share with you. I think their comments are very interesting. A.I. Wintermuth says this: So, they took leftover Hummers, ripped all the side panels off, and called it a new vehicle? ? Tacos commented to Wintermuth's comment with this: You didn't read anything here at all, did you? And then Todd Simpson says this: So, the Army is paying $107,000 each for what is essentially a stripped-down 2020 Chevy Colorado ZR2 that cost $41,000 each on the car lot. Maybe somebody should contact Toyota for a better deal. After all, if they can stand up to the abuse of insurgents the world over and are within their budget, certainly they are good enough for the U.S. Army. Of course, that drew a comment from Will Ford, who said, Screw Toyota. Those are the latest stories coming out of the motor pool of the U.S. Army. The M-113s are going out to pasture. They're being replaced by the AMPV. And the Army has bought 2,000 Chevrolet Colorado ZR2 trucks to haul 9 infantrymen around the battlefield. As a Vietnam veteran, I find that very interesting. And again, I would like to get my name in the pot that if these ISVs don't pass the air mobility test, I'd be glad to buy one of them. Of course, it would have to be at a reduced rate, as the government always does. Buy things expensive and then sell them cheaply. Why don't you go on over to the podcast website at VietnamVeteranNews.com, check out episode 1842, take a look at these jazzed up Chevrolet Colorado ZR2 trucks, better known as ISVs, and you just might want to put your name in to get one of those 2,000 the Army bought, just in case they don't pass the air mobility test. You never know. You might be able to score a good deal on this off-the-road vehicle. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1842 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for coming to listen to these stories. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to listen to more coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?